You are listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my regular weekly guests, and we are all here to share the research, the science, and the strategies, as well as some of the fun, to help you to create a more active life. Hello, and before you dive into this week's episode all about aquatic activity, where I'm chatting with Vicky Hatch, there seems to be a little bit of an issue with my side of the recording. It's a little bit staticky and fuzzy. So please bear with us because Vicky's side is absolutely fine and I hope it doesn't interfere with your enjoyment of the episode. Thank you. Welcome to this episode of Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my guest this week, Vicky Hatch, who I've known for, 2 decades now. Since we used to work together we used to work together at YMCA Fit, and then we actually run our own business, Exact Training, together for 15 years. And we're still working together on various things as well. So I've brought her along today because Vicky is like me, she's kind of been there, done most roles and stuff like that, but she's a real specialist in aqua and aquatic activity. Also pre and postnatal diabetes and cardiac rehab and pulmonary rehab. She works on the CAN rehab course with myself and with Professor Anna Campbell, who was on one of our previous episodes. And we actually wrote a book together, which we'll talk about at the end. But you've also tell us a little bit more about yourself in your words.
Okay, well, that's a fantastic introduction. I don't think I can do any better. We've worked together for a couple of decades. It's a long time, so it's kind of a nice sort of chat to have. Currently still working a lot in cardiac rehab and aquatic exercise, and certainly on the clinical side with clients with not just cardiac issues but other kind of long-term chronic conditions as well, where the aquatic environment is so perfect for them, really. And I suppose I first got into it from teaching studio classes in a health club where I was doing dry side stuff, and I'd walk past the pool every day and hear all of these lovely all of this fun and kind of noise coming from the pool. And it wasn't just the aqua classes, it was swimming as well. And I thought, well, that's got to be a great place to do some exercise. And it kind of all came from there, really. So, you get the qualification, and that's when you really start to learn and kind of understand what the benefits might be, not just for, your apparently healthy population, but for clinical conditions as well. So, and the two match really nicely together.
And this is it, isn't it? It's kind of, we think of swimming, we think of aqua, we think of it as just a nice fun thing to do, but actually there are a lot of benefits that are going on under the surface, almost literally. So
literally, yeah.
Why is it so beneficial? Why is exercising in water
so many reasons why movement in water is beneficial. Buoyancy of the water lifts you, quite literally, kind of physically. But I think, and there may well be some research out there, but I haven't found it yet. But quite sort of mentally as well, I think that water environment is great for kind of for well-being, for mental well-being. So you've got the buoyancy making you feel physically lighter. You've got the resistance of the water supporting your movements, so that you don't overreach, so that you don't fall hard. Maybe just get a little bit wetter, but you're not going to fall over in a big traumatic fall. That same resistance can give your muscles a bit of extra work as you move through the water, and this helps condition them without overworking them. And that support offered by the water might also allow greater freedom of movement, which can feel quite nice for people that have mobility issues, that have been restricted by pain or sort of an injury. For people that don't like getting hot and sweaty or find it really uncomfortable for whatever reason, then the water environment helps to moderate body temperature. And it's just a place where, as I said before, you can have fun and it doesn't necessarily feel like exercise.
And that's the thing, isn't it? We just, anyone who's listened to any of these episodes will know that I'm all about the fun. And if people don't enjoy it, they won't come back, which is where that fun is so important.
Exactly.
But you mentioned about, being supportive, lifting the pressure as well. And that, not because of the pressure of the water and the way your body moves through the water and the resistance of the water means, like you said, you can't overreach or overstretch. And actually that's what makes it so ideal for people with joint issues, isn't it? Because you're minimising the risk of injury, but you're actually maximising the support given to the joint.
Absolutely, yeah. And so, you can think of lots of conditions or just sort of general symptoms, bodily symptoms, where that might be helpful. Any joint condition or injury in any joint or in the spine particularly, they get that benefit from the support, but the weightless movement as well. So if you think about those weight-bearing joints and, in the lower body, but also the spine as well, you offload those, that's going to feel a whole lot more comfortable for somebody. But also they're supported, so they're not going to be sort of, as I say, overreaching or exceeding a comfortable and a safe range of movement. And again, that muscle conditioning with the resistance of the water without excess sort of stress on the bones and the joints and the muscles. You mentioned cancer, people with lymphedema. What a great place to be with lymphedema. That hydrostatic pressure of the water that you mentioned can be really helpful and might temporarily reduce that swelling. And hey, you don't have to wear your garment in the water.
And that's a big issue for a lot of people, isn't it? They don't like exercising because they have these very tight, very restrictive garments, which just feel uncomfortable and make you feel hotter. And I know from the courses we've done, working with people with lymphedema, one of the issues they have is the arm or the leg is so heavy that it just puts them off. Whereas in the water, you take away that heaviness, you take away the garment, you've got a lot more freedom of movement, and it just feels so much nicer, doesn't it?
So much more freedom, so much more natural and normal, if you like, if we can use that word. Thinking, other conditions, anywhere where balance is compromised, you might be thinking like things like Parkinson's or MS, or again with cancer, thinking about peripheral neuropathy, where balance might be compromised. You're not going to have those traumatic falls. So that might increase confidence of actually exercising, because you're going to, you can start once you've kind of got into the water safely, which we must kind of caveat that with. You're not going to have those traumatic falls. And that is then going to maybe motivate somebody to maybe do a little bit more than they would feel like doing if they were on dry land, because fear of falling is huge, isn't it? As we know from dealing with, the clients that we've had and the people that we've taught. It's a real, people with osteoporosis who have a fear of falling. Again, it's a great place to start exercising. I will just kind of say, the water environment isn't going to be great for bone density, but it's great for improving confidence and general kind of physical function before you start maybe exercising on dry land. So, there's so many reasons. We could be here forever, couldn't we, talking about it all. It's great for core stability for people that are going to might have a risk of falling. If you're walking through water, it's comparable to kind of walking, trying to have a brisk walk on a very windy day. You have that force, and that's exactly what the water is like. Yeah.
And this is the thing, and people sort of say, "Oh, well, it's not much good for bone density, and it's not much good for this, and it's too light intensity." But if people are doing nothing, then it's better than doing nothing. And if it, like you say, if it helps to make them feel a bit more confident, if they feel safer in that environment, then surely, it's a much, much better thing for them to do, isn't it? Just a bit random, but just thinking about things like you mentioned Parkinson's, and certainly things like MS, where there may well be things like muscle spasms and stuff like that. Now, I know that this is something that often puts people off because they're worried about having a spasm when they're exercising, or they find that when they're moving it. Does the resistance of the water, that extra resistance, that extra pressure, actually help to manage jerky movements?
I think that's a really, really good point. And the sort of the muscular response to exercise, be it spasm, be it tension, or be it pain perception will depend a lot on the temperature of the water. Warm water will tend to relax muscles a little bit, which can be helpful in terms of spasm. Cold water is really useful for reducing inflammation. So you'd use cooler water. But so certainly if you're in a warmer kind of environment, then it may be that spasm is reduced. There is very little kind of research specifically on sort of Parkinson's and water particularly, but we know that any kind of physical activity is helpful, and some small studies have shown that it's actually more helpful and better tolerated for all of the reasons that we started talking about. Yeah.
I'm actually chatting with somebody about cold water swimming in a couple of weeks, but
Yeah.
what we're talking mainly about is more sort of that warm water pool environment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which again is something that a lot of people feel really comfortable in. It's fun, isn't it, as well? And I mentioned the social side of it, and this is something that you see is that, you know, most of the aqua classes I see, people are chatting, and
Yeah.
because I don't know, it seems to create a much more of a social environment in some of the dry land classes, and that's so important, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, you know, if you're thinking of sort of running a group-based sort of water session or you know, as an instructor, or if you're sort of going to a session, go with somebody and have that social interaction, because often, you know, that's as important, if not more important, for a lot of people than the actual physical kind of benefits. We see that a lot in sort of aquanatal, where, you know, these pregnancy groups that work in water. So important. You know, we know that for them, you know, just bonding with other kind of mums to be, having a chat to normalise any discomforts of pregnancy that they might be feeling is really important. And having a little kind of workout in the water is a good way of having those chats and that interaction with other people.
I was going to say, it makes, because of the buoyancy of the water, it means that, you know, if you're really experiencing that heavy, draggy feeling,
completely,
being in the water just makes you feel so much lighter and normal again.
Absolutely.
And I know that you know, people say, oh, it just feels so soothing and so relaxing.
And it's supportive for those joints, particularly the pelvis that's starting to loosen up, ready for childbirth. It's good, supportive and useful sort of moderate work for core, so it supports the muscles around the growing baby. And again, remember we talked about the hydrostatic pressure reducing swelling and lymphedema. It can temporarily reduce any swelling that pregnant mum might have in the later stages of pregnancy, where ankles and hands and things start to get a bit swollen. It can be quite useful for temporarily reducing that as well.
So people out there thinking, gosh, this sounds really good. It sounds like fun. It sounds like it's not too intense. I don't have to get hot and sweaty. Have a bit of a laugh. Is there anybody who shouldn't exercise in water?
So I think in any medical condition, you should always check with your healthcare team that water is going to be a safe environment for you. And there might be some extra advice that's needed to keep you safe, especially if you've got a heart or lung condition. The dynamics of the fluid dynamics of the water and the properties of the water can have a sort of specific effects on circulation, which may not be helpful in the aftermath of a cardiac event. And for people who have kind of breathing issues, have respiratory conditions where breathing isn't comfortable, it is restricted, then being in the water might not be very comfortable. So they kind of, maybe it might not be a bad place for them to be, but it might be something that they need to get used to first. So it's always worth having a chat with your healthcare team beforehand.
Have a chat with the healthcare team, but also have a chat with the aqua instructor as well, and just sort of
Absolutely.
say, look, I've got this going on.
And have a chat with the guys at the pool. you might want to find out whether there's a less busy time where you might want to go, if that's your preference, and just see what they've got in the way of kind of helping you get access into the pool. You might need a hoist, you might need a different kind of access step, that kind of thing, which they might have they should have on site, which you can use. And if you have a chat with them first, find out what they've got, what facilities they've got that you might need and might be able to use, then you're going to feel more comfortable going into that environment in the first instance.
And that is important, isn't it? Is checking access arrangements, because some pools have very, very, there's steps built into the side of the pool wall, and that can be quite tricky for people if they've got mobility issues or balance issues, or a lot of body tissue, a lot of bulk. So I think it is something that's worth going along and having a chat. You don't want to be standing there on poolside in your nice new swimming costume and then think, crikey, how am I going to get in? Is there anything else people should be doing before they start? Is there anything they should know or think about or check before they start? Just anybody who's not very fit and wants to give it a go.
I mean, check the access to your pool. As I say, that having maybe a slightly quieter time is useful, and just think about is there what you're going to take with you. Make sure you've got sort of the right gear to put on. You might and again, if you've had a chat with the guys at the pool, you feel like you want to wear a t-shirt or a little pair of shorts or something, is that okay? Sometimes they have specific rules. Can I keep my glasses on? Can I keep, if I've got my hearing aids, if they are up to it, can I wear them if I'm in the pool? Is it okay if I don't swim? Maybe water walking is a fantastic kind of exercise. If I can't swim, but, my physiotherapist or whatever has told me water walking is going to be quite helpful, or they've given me some exercises to do and I'd quite like to do them in the pool. Can I do that? Is that okay for me? So just find out what is okay. Make a friend of the lifeguard or whatever. And they all they do is sit up on their high chair, isn't it? And they just watch. So, get them to have a chat with you, and they love to kind of look out for people. And let them know what you're doing or what you're not going to be doing. And if you have a different way of moving in the water, a different way that you're going to be swimming in the water, let them know so that, they're not going to be worried if they see that you are splashing a lot. That might just be the way that you move through the water.
Right, yes.
So those kind of things.
So water walking then. You mentioned water walking, and it sounds obvious you walk in the water, but it's not quite as simple as that, is it? Because of the pressure of the water and the buoyancy. So how would you start with water walking? So somebody, say there isn't a class on at the right time, or they're not ready for that yet, and they just think, well, I would like to sort of just get used to the water, so walking in it sounds good. How would they get going?
I think it depends. It always depends, doesn't it? It depends on your pool. Find the shallower water. If it's a health club, one of the kind of the health club chains, they tend now to have a pool that's pretty much all one depth. I think it's a fairly generic, isn't it? So unless you're 5 foot nothing like me, you're normally sort of above waist level unless you're super tall, but sort of anywhere between, find a depth if you can, anywhere between sort of waist and sort of bust line or sort of, at the bottom of the breastbone, if you like, and have a little walk there. Maybe try widths at the beginning so that you haven't got to go too far. Take it slowly, gradually build up, and just think about sort of how you're moving in the water. You might want to use a swim float for support, or one of the swim noodles, the long sort of, some people call them spaghetti, don't they? The round sort of noodle shape, colourful things that you can use. They do create a bit of flotation, but if you use them on the surface and walk with them, then they can keep you a little bit steadier, but a little bit of walking at a time. Build up slowly, and then you might want to try walking a bit further. If it's all one depth and you're happy, you could try walking a whole length, those kind of things, and then build up from there. You could even try a little bit of jogging.
I know from experience that I think people tend to walk differently in the water.
They do.
Yes. So I think it's important, isn't it, to stress, try and do the heel toe action. Otherwise, you're going to
Absolutely.
end up with very stiff calves
Yeah.
afterwards.
Yes, exactly. You always sort of try and keep your heels down. And for that reason, if you've got the opportunity, try walking in slightly shallower water first. So if you're not sure, and if you find a depth, yeah, I'm quite comfortable when you start walking, and you're a little bit sort of off balance, and you're coming up off your toes even, and you're starting to float, you're a bit too deep. So go a little bit shallower so that you can keep your heels down. Try and think about pulling the belly button in a little bit as well, and walk through the heel to the toe so you do get those heels down like you mentioned. Yeah, absolutely.
Your calves will thank you the next day if you do
Yeah.
that. And like you say, with jogging, presumably that's a similar sort of thing. It's just a normal jogging
Mm.
walk. I mean, those of you that haven't tried it, honestly, it really does feel different. It doesn't feel like jogging on land
Not at
or
all.
walking on land. It
And
is,
you're actually, if you think about when you're jogging or even when you're walking, actually, if you're not using a kind of a noodle to help you float, you will actually naturally start to paddle a little bit with your hands. There'll be sort of, um, you'll be having flat palms and you just do it intuitively. They'll be kind of pushing the water back away from you. And that's great because that's more muscles involved.
yeah. And I suppose from there you can move to slightly deeper water or um,
Exactly.
bigger strides with
Yeah.
faster jogging. So
Yeah.
it's so
Exactly.
adaptable, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
and we talked a little bit about pregnancy, prenatal aqua, and it is something that is recommended, isn't it? Which is
Mm,
so
mm.
important. And is there anything? So if somebody is pregnant and they do want to sort of go to academic classes, is there anything they need to be aware of beforehand?
There are some very well kind of published contraindications, absolute contraindications to any sort of structured exercise in pregnancy. And that means absolutely don't do it. Yeah, absolute means absolutely not. Contraindications is the sign that you shouldn't be doing it. And they are nice, they are published, and you'll probably find those actually through your midwife, or sort of any sort of carer that you're seeing, or your GP, or your practice nurse who's looking after your pregnancy. Um, and so you shouldn't be doing any sort of structured exercise if you're kind of having any of those kind of absolute no-nos. And generally, I think with pregnancy, it's one of those times, isn't it, when you really need to be listening to your body. And if you don't feel like doing it, if you're feeling really tired or unwell in any way, you might need to check it out. But just do whatever feels natural, and don't force yourself to go because you think you should. Um, you know, do what your body tells you. Um, but water is a great place to be in
It is.
pregnancy,
It's
for
really
sure.
interesting. I know my daughter-in-law was a runner and
Mm,
kind of ran for as long as possible during pregnancy, but she said she got to about 5 6 months, and she said it was starting to feel ugh. And she
mm,
said I just suddenly thought, oh, why don't I go swimming? And she said I've
mm,
never really thought of being in the water, swimming or exercising in the water as beneficial. But she said, gosh, it
mm,
was really, really um, effective,
mm.
but she also just felt really comfortable and really
Yeah,
supported in the water. And I think,
yeah,
you know, pregnancy, older adults, people with joint issues,
yeah,
if people who are bigger, people who are overweight or obese even,
yeah,
it's a very supportive
yeah.
environment to be in, isn't it? Because you just feel much lighter and that you can move
Yes,
much more freely.
yeah.
And
And
also,
also, if you've got body image issues, then once you're in the water, nobody's going to see you. And back to your kind of your daughter-in-law, in terms of the running and then going into to water. Water is a great place to just kind of maintain your movement and your function and your fitness. And pregnancy is not a time to be increasing your fitness. And so by changing what she did to move into water, she was just kind of maintaining, but actually feeling, actually this is the right thing for me to do. And in pregnancy, that's really important for
it is.
yeah.
I know you've got a few funny stories to tell, so I'd love it if you'd share a couple of them. Otherwise, I'm going to tell people anyway.
How long have you got? I mean, I'm going to tell you that the ones about, I mean, how many times I've fallen into the pool, I can't tell you while I've been teaching. One time, I'm not
sure the instructor's always on the side of the pool.
Ideally, absolutely, yeah. Unless you're personal training, yeah. But I fell in. Well, I didn't fall in. I fell in. Well, I have fallen in. For the most part, I've been able to kind of rip off my head mic before I've got in, so I've saved the head mic, but got myself wet. One of the times I fell on poolside, I made such a loud noise that we had people coming out the nearby saunas, kind of trying to find out what the commotion was. And there's me coming up, saying I'm fine, trying to be all professional and carry on. And the group saying, "Oh, we can stop if you need to." And I'm like, "No, we'll carry on." But yeah. And I think once I had, somebody did lose their undergarments, if you like, their bottom half, yeah. But she managed to grab it quickly. And then the number of ladies, I say to them, you really do need to wear a one piece, particularly if you're pregnant and your boobs are growing, because they are quite mobile in the water and they do kind of like to make an appearance. The number of times I've had to kind of luckily the aquanatal tends to be a closed session, so there wasn't an audience, but yeah, just put them back in. That'll serve her right for looking so fantastic at about 6 months pregnant in a triangle bikini. That's what I say.
Yeah,
she shouldn't look. It's one of those things. I think so lovely.
people do worry about that, don't they? And it's just get yourself a good one piece that covers everything up. And if you are worried, best top or a t-shirt.
Yes, pregnant or not, you could even wear an old. I mean, the chlorine doesn't do your clothing any good, but you could even wear an old bra under your swimming costume, and certainly if you want, pop a t-shirt on, a reasonable, nothing too baggy that's going to kind of fill up, with water and create problems for you moving. But absolutely, wear what's comfortable.
And that's it. And be aware though that these things do happen, and most people will just either tell you, just sort of say, "Oh, pop them back in, Gladys," or they'll look away. So never be embarrassed about something like that. It is, like I say, it's a very, very social environment. Isn't it?
They're often too focused on what they're doing anyway. So I think a lot of time you think people have seen you, but they haven't. And if you're kind of good at observing your group, you'll see it before other people do anyway. But yeah, often it won't be noticeable to anybody else. But it's such a great place to be. And there is this tradition, isn't there, that it's old for older adults, but actually for all the reasons that we've just talked about, there's so many other opportunities for other groups to get the benefits. And that also goes for highly trained people who maybe have had an injury coming back to exercise. And that could be a traumatic injury. It could be a long-term illness that they're rehabbing from. Water is a great place to start. And people are kind of recognising it more and more now.
That's it. I'm just laughing because I remember when you were teaching the course in Cardiff. You were teaching the instructors in Cardiff, and there was a youth rugby team there, and they all decided, "Oh, this looks like a laugh. We'll join in." And I think half of them had to stop because they just couldn't believe how hard it was. So, it's something that it can be very gentle, it can be very soothing, it can be very relaxing, or it can actually be a really tough workout. But as you say, if somebody's got an injury, say of an arm or a lower body injury, it's a good environment where you can isolate the rest of your body and work it while you're keeping the injured one kind of still. And it's it's just such a lovely environment. I was just going to say something. Chlorine. If people have issues with chlorine, I know that not everywhere uses chlorine these days, So is there anything they should be asking about the
I think that, well, if they
system?
know that they have issues with chlorine, either in terms of their kind of lungs and sort of breathing, or it with the skin, they need to, again, it's making friends with the pool guy, isn't it? And finding out what system of is used in the water to keep it clean. Because you're right, these days chlorine is kind of the old-fashioned method, and people are using lots more kind of up-to-date and kinder methods. So in terms of your skin, it's kinder. And again, if you think, actually, do you know what? My skin's a bit sensitive, but it's not, massively so. Then you can limit the amount of time that you're in the water, making sure that you sort of rinse well afterwards. But and there again, it's with it like with any exercise, isn't it? You don't have to be in, it's not, doesn't have to be an hour. It doesn't even have to be 30 minutes. If you can, I mean, I know sort of getting in and out of the pool can take a little bit more time, but you can be in there for 10, 15 minutes and then come out. And certainly for some conditions, that might be a way to start, and that might be the best way of doing things initially, to avoid fatigue, and to avoid sort of overworking.
I think for me, I've done a few classes and things like that. I know a lot of people who've gone to classes and they've kind of learnt the techniques, but maybe the timing's not right, or it's the holidays and they can't get to a regular class. But because the equipment's usually available, they will actually go and do a bit of swimming, then some kind of aqua type moves, walking, some resistance work and things like that. So they'll almost create their own little workout, where they're not tied into time or anything, but they're still doing something that makes them feel really, really good and is beneficial. And just one word of what I don't know if it works for everybody, but I do find that I do need to go to the loo quite quickly after I finish my session.
Completely, yeah. The way that the water works, yeah, the way that the water works, it will sort of push the water, the fluid out of your kind of tissues and into your bladder, so your kidneys will be working a little bit harder. The other thing you mentioned about sort of the kind of doing some other stuff as well as the swimming, either with equipment or without. Water is fantastic because of the resistance of the water. Depending on the move that you've got, you will actually get both muscles or all the muscles in a group, the opposing muscles working in the same movement. So whereas on dry land you might get, a bicep curl would just work a bicep. If you're underwater, if your arms are underwater, then the curl will actually work your biceps and your triceps in water. It's got what we call dual concentric work. So you work both those muscles. So you kind of get 2 for 1, which is great. And it's that mild muscle challenge, which is great, particularly for older people, deconditioned people, people that are rehabbing, and are coming back into fitness.
And it's a time saver as well, which is always handy.
Quick time,
Yeah.
yeah.
The other thing I was going to say, and this was something I actually read in a book on relaxation and meditation, but it was saying that if you're a swimmer, swim as you normally do, but use the last couple of lengths to actually really slow right down and become very, very aware of the water. So as whatever stroke you're doing, you're really thinking about the movement, feel of the water, and slow it right down, which, I mean, A is good for pulse lowering anyway, bringing us back to normal. But I just wondered about the relaxation element of water and that sort of meditative.
So much so, but unfortunately, because of other stuff going on in the pool, it's often quite hard to get that. So slowing things down at the end can be quite useful. There's some lovely, Tai Chi, the land-based sort of discipline of Tai Chi, should be done around water and around moving water. And there is a kind of a newer sort of I Chi, which is sort of Tai Chi based moves in the water. But it's often difficult to get that the most benefit, because you've got other stuff going on around, which can actually disrupt the sort of the meditation aspect, and also we really kind of need to keep moving a little bit in the water so we don't get too cold. So the slow swimming is ideal. Just some slow, big kind of range of movement. So, standing and doing breaststroke arms, sweeping the arms forward and back, sweeping the arms around the body, sort of in a big circle. Those kind of things can be really helpful just in the last couple of minutes to keep you moving and just get you back to kind of get you kind of more focused and a bit more relaxed. Yeah.
We know that sort of that kind of relaxation, that meditation, that stillness is quite an important part of activity, even though you're not moving. But it's a good way of bringing it into the water, just gradually slowing right down and just really experiencing the feel of the water on you. Brilliant. Vicky, thank you so much for coming in. Vicky and I have actually written a book together all about Aqua for pre and postnatal women, so I'll pop the links in there if you do want to get hold of it. A lot of the work you do now is with cardiac rehab with the BACPR, which is all about cardiac prevention and rehabilitation. So if anybody does want to get in touch with Vicky, where can they find you?
They can find me on, where can they find me? They can find me on the BACPR website. I'm past chair of the EPG Exercise Professionals Group and I'm chair of the Exercise Instructor Network. I do have an Instagram page as well. You can find me on there.
I'll pop the links in when we put the episode out.
Yeah, LinkedIn I'm on as well. So yeah, all the usual kind of social media stuff.
I'll pop the links in. But if anybody wants to know more about Aqua in particular, Vicky is definitely the person to talk to, because it is just such an important discipline, but it often gets overlooked because it is very different, isn't it, to teaching in dry land?
Yeah, absolutely. So for any kind of instructors, I would urge you to kind of do a reputable training course, and don't get Sarah started on reputable training courses, because we've seen a lot of disreputable ones. But find an accredited training course so you really understand what's happening with the body in water. We've just mentioned the muscle movements. They can be so different. The speed of movements generally is so different in water. And you really need to understand that if you're going to be successfully teaching people in water, particularly groups.
And people with conditions.
And people with a condition, well. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yay. You've been listening to Creating Active Lives, all about aqua and aquatic activity. Very alliterative, that, with me, Sarah Belitha, and my wonderful guest this week, Vicky Hatch. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in the next episode soon. Thank you for listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Belitha, and my guests. Join me each week for more on how to create and sustain everyday activity, and follow me online at Fitness Career Mentor or Fabulous if you're interested in career development and more on creating active lifestyles.